Good morning and welcome to this module which is rightly called problem solving for leaders. When we talk of leadership, we have this image of either a captain of a ship or a pilot in an aircraft or the CEO of a large organization or the director of a large government body, which is what leadership is in many ways is all about. What we often don't realize is that problem solving is an intrinsic part of all organizations, whether it's a family, whether it's a military, whether it's a for-profit commercial organization or an education institution. Problem solving is an intrinsic part of that whole exercise. Let me tell you how it looks from a cultural perspective. Since we have been children, our families have always told us कि भाई झंझट में मत पड़ना, don't get into trouble, which actually is quite counterintuitive because the whole idea of running an organization is about solving problems, and if there were no problems, there wouldn't be leaders. You look at, for example, this entire, whether it's the armed forces, whether it's the police, whether it's the income tax department, the sales tax department, physicians, firefighters, their whole profession is concentrated around problem solving. And as leaders of commercial organizations or of government organizations or the military, we must take into account, we must welcome problems, we must understand problems, we must solve problems, and that is where being a true leader lies. The ability to solve problems as hierarchically you go higher and higher to higher order problems, that is what distinguishes true leadership from regular leadership. So let's launch into this whole exercise. I'm referring to my computer to figure out what's the next part of the script all about. The first is we'll use a very tried, tested and true method to set this whole module in place. The first section is setting it in place and understanding what this whole business of problem solving is about. And we'll use an old and tried and tested method which is called the 5 W's and the 1 H, which is what every rookie newspaperman is taught when reporting a story, which is why, what, where, when, why, and who. All right, so that's what we will look at. And the very first step we will start with, what is a problem, right? You can look at it as, for example, that little textbook we have in school, which is Euclid's book on trigonometry. We will realize on geometry. We will realize that that's the starting point, that is the problem. So we have problems in mathematics, we have problems in physics, we have problems in medicine, we have problems in business. A problem, as the dictionary puts it, is a matter or situation that is regarded as unwelcome or harmful and needing to be dealt with to be overcome. All right? So that's the dictionary definition. It's unwelcome or harmful. You should recognize it as such and you would want it changed. That is what the definition of a problem is. What is problem solving? Again, we are looking at a definition which says generic or ad hoc methods with or without systems to find solutions to a particular problem. That is the what part. The third part is where does it occur? And as we discussed a moment ago, it could occur in physics, medicine, business, economics, teaching, learning, daily life, fitness, sports, you name it, everywhere you have problems which are either harmful or which are unwelcome and need to be dealt with to improve the situation. The next one is where, when, why does it occur? Why does it occur? And this is part philosophical and part engineering. The philosophical part is, if you think it's not a problem, then it's not a problem. And as physicians will tell you, there is something called the pain index. The same amount of pain, there are people who can completely put up with it and not have an issue at all. The same level of pain in another person may totally incapacitate them. It really depends on the person's ability to feel the pain. You would have noticed it when driving. If your steering wheel is slightly off center, it drags to one side, but soon enough you get used to it. And there are people who will continue with that car for ages, but there are people who would want it improved immediately because they're not comfortable with that situation. The other one is when is this problem recognized? When is it solved? And that's entirely up to a leader to recognize the problem, solve it in the short term, medium term, or long term. Here there is a slight input from a completely different area called design thinking, where a lot of people believe that if at all this was looked at when we were putting this thing together, the problem wouldn't have arisen today. Which is all very well, but the problem is that is a priori, that is before the whole thing was set up. A leader normally faces situations in which problems occur during. So while it's all very wonderful to sort out a particular solution even before you have implemented it so that you don't face any problems, it's also entirely possible that you may run up against it when it is happening. So that when you solve the problem is entirely up to the leader to recognize where there is a harmful or unwelcome situation. Who is interested in this problem solution? Anybody who is directly or indirectly involved. It could be the operator, it could be the user, it could be the customer, it could be the logistics provider, it could be the person on the packing line, it could be the person who is accounting for it, it could be the person who is delivering it, installing it, taking care of the guarantees or warranties. Any part of this whole cycle, any one of the people who would be interested in recognizing this as harmful or unwelcome would be a party to wanting it solved. They could be testing, they could be certifying. Anybody who's involved one way or another with the product or service is somebody who should be interested, and it's up to good leadership to recognize, to identify those people, work with them and find solutions. And the last one, which is the most interesting thing which we are coming to, is how do we solve this problem, or what are the methods for problem solutions? And that is where the rest of this module is configured to help us try and figure out where it is and how it is that generic or ad hoc methods. We could use some standard methods. We could also use some ad hoc methods to make it work. There are a number of approaches to problem solving, and many of those we will be, some of those we will be discussing with actual examples to convince you that yes, these indeed can be solved. So to summarize this whole section, we are saying A, problems are extremely important because this is the only way we can figure out what to do next and how to improve what we're doing. The second thing is, because of the kind of structures most problems have, the higher up you are in the organization, the easier it is for you to see and recognize those problems, sometimes as advantages, sometimes as great steps ahead in the organizational efficiency and delivery. And the third thing we're saying is, this problem solving is not something that's magical. These can be addressed, these have been addressed, and we will see examples of how it is done. To give you a very simple example of how a problem is so invisible in spite of it being all around us, I will use an extremely common example that I'm sure all of you have been through, and I wonder how many of you have really recognized. Let me use a standard credit card. I won't show you which company it is because it's the same for credit cards in any country, any issuer, any bank. MasterCard or Visa, it's the same problem all through. I flipped this card over to the other side where it has something very helpful called helpline numbers. Please note that I have to use a magnifying glass to see this. All right? And the more important the card, whether it's gold, platinum, diamond, ultra diamond or whatever, the more fine print it will be, which is actually very counterintuitive because as you get older is when you get the better cards and you see less. Anyway, that's another problem. What we see here is helpline numbers. Ahmedabad so, Jaipur so, Allahabad so, Amritsar so, Cuttack so. And I'll read out the number for you. It is 8 digits which are completely different. It says, for example, I cannot read out the digits because then you'll be able to identify the bank. So I'll just read out the random. It says digit X, X, Y, Z, X, X, Y, Z, A, C, A, B. Now my question to you is, and this is the helpline number. What is the single biggest emergency you will have with the credit card? All right, you lose it. And then how do you get the helpline number? So while you see every bank has bent over backwards to implement information technology and computing systems and IVRs and fraud detection and all sorts of communication and transaction technologies, as far as I am concerned, I can't reach the bank when I've lost the card. I can't see why they can't put a number like 1-800-HELP-BANK. It's an extremely complicated number which is so difficult to remember. Now this is the sort of problem that only a leader can see because they're looking at it from higher up. So therefore, this is the 5 W's and the 1 H. What, where, why, when, who, and how of problem solving, and then we will shift now in a moment to the next module, which is looking at problem solving myths.